Natasha Cole stared at her computer screen, watching the cursor blink mockingly against the white void of an empty document. 3 weeks. She had 3 weeks to present a groundbreaking campaign concept to the board, and her mind was utterly blank. The fluorescent lights of her corner office at Sterling and Associates buzzed overhead, a soundtrack to her mounting panic. At 29, Natasha had built her reputation on being reliable, sharp, and always prepared. Her colleagues knew her as the woman who arrived first and left last, whose presentations were flawless, whose campaigns never failed to deliver results. She was efficiency personified, her dark hair always pulled into a neat bun, her blazers pressed to perfection, her desk organized to the point of obsession. But tonight, sitting alone on the 14th floor while the city lights of Chicago flickered below, none of that mattered. She was failing, and the pressure was crushing. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca, her college roommate and the only person who could see through her carefully maintained composure. "Still at the office? You need a break. Come to my place. I have wine and something that might help." Natasha glanced at the clock. 9:47 p.m. She should stay, push through, find the answer somewhere in the depths of exhaustion. Instead, she found herself grabbing her coat. The hidden studio. Rebecca's loft in the arts district smelled like jasmine tea and oil paint. She greeted Natasha with a tight hug and a knowing look. Rebecca had always been the creative one, a freelance graphic designer who moved through life with an easiness that Natasha both envied and couldn't comprehend. "You look terrible," Rebecca said, handing her a glass of red wine. "Thanks, that's exactly what I needed to hear." "I'm serious, Tasha. When was the last time you did something that wasn't work? When did you last feel something real?" Natasha sank into the worn leather couch. "I feel plenty. I feel stressed, overwhelmed, terrified of losing my job." "Those aren't feelings, those are symptoms." Rebecca sat beside her. "Listen, I know you came here looking for campaign ideas, but I think you need something different. Have you ever considered doing something completely outside your comfort zone?" "Like what? Skydiving? I don't have time for hobbies, Becca." "I'm talking about art, real art, not the corporate stuff you deal with." Rebecca pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos. "There's this painter I know, Julian Foster. He works out of a warehouse studio on the west side. His work is incredible, Tasha. It's raw and honest and makes you feel things you didn't know you could feel." Natasha looked at the images. The paintings showed women, but not in any conventional sense. They were emotional landscapes disguised as portraits. Each face told a story of struggle, strength, surrender. "They're beautiful," she admitted. "But how does this help my campaign?" "Maybe it doesn't. Maybe that's the point." Rebecca squeezed her hand. "You've spent so long building walls around yourself that you've forgotten what it feels like to be moved by something. Go see him. Ask if you can observe his process. Maybe it'll spark something." An unusual meeting. The warehouse district looked different in daylight. Natasha found Julian's studio tucked between an abandoned textile factory and a coffee roaster. The building's brick exterior was covered in ivy, and a simple brass plaque read "Foster Studio" beside a heavy metal door. She knocked twice before hearing footsteps. The door opened to reveal a man who looked like he'd stepped out of one of his own paintings. Julian Foster had dark hair that fell carelessly around his face, sharp cheekbones, and eyes the color of storm clouds. Paint stained his hands and the rolled sleeves of his white shirt. "Can I help you?" His voice was deeper than she expected. "I'm Natasha Cole. Rebecca Chen suggested I visit your studio. I work in advertising and I'm looking for creative inspiration." Something flickered across his face. Disappointment, maybe. "If you're after commercial work, you've wasted a trip." "That's not what I want." Natasha surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. "I just want to see your work, to understand how you create something that makes people feel." Julian studied her for a long moment, his gaze so intense she had to resist the urge to look away. Finally, he stepped aside. 5 minutes. Don't touch anything." The studio was vast and flooded with natural light from industrial windows. Canvases in various stages of completion leaned against exposed brick walls. The smell of linseed oil and turpentine filled the air, but it was the finished paintings that stopped Natasha in her tracks. A woman laughing with tears in her eyes, another staring directly at the viewer with devastating vulnerability. A third caught in a moment of quiet strength, her shoulders bare, her gaze distant. "You paint souls," Natasha whispered. "I paint truth. Most people spend their whole lives hiding. I paint what they're hiding from." "How do you do that?" "By getting them to stop performing, by seeing them when they think no one's watching." He turned to face her fully. "Your 5 minutes are up." "Wait." Natasha turned to him, surprising herself again. "Could I come back? Watch you work? I promise I won't interfere." "Why would you want that?" "Because I've forgotten how to feel anything real, and your work makes me remember that I'm supposed to." The honesty in her own words startled her. Julian's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "I'm starting a new series, 7 paintings of the same woman, each one revealing a different layer." He paused, considering. "I need a model, someone who isn't trained, who doesn't know how to perform for the camera, someone real." Natasha's heart began to race. "I'm sure you have plenty of people who would want to do that." "I do, but they all want something from it. Fame, money, a story to tell. You're different. You're terrified right now, and you're still standing here. That's what I need." "I can't. I'm not a model. I have a job, responsibilities." 3 evenings a week for 2 months. That's all I'm asking. In exchange, you get to watch the entire creative process, every brushstroke, every decision, every moment of doubt and breakthrough. Isn't that what you came for? To understand how creation works? Every logical part of Natasha's brain screamed at her to refuse, to walk out, to return to the safety of her office and her spreadsheets and her carefully controlled life. But something else stirred inside her, something that had been buried so long she'd almost forgotten it existed. Curiosity, desire, the terrifying, exhilarating possibility of being truly seen. "When do we start?" she heard herself say. Julian smiled for the first time, and it transformed his entire face. "Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. And Natasha, wear something you'd wear if no one was watching." Natasha changed her outfit 4 times before settling on a simple cream sweater and dark jeans. Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed effort, yet her hands trembled as she locked her apartment door. She had told no one where she was going, not even Rebecca. This felt too personal, too strange to explain. The studio looked different at night. Soft golden light spilled from the windows, and when Julian opened the door, he seemed more relaxed than during their first meeting. He wore faded jeans and a gray Henley, his hair still damp as if he'd just showered. "You came." There was genuine surprise in his voice. "You thought I wouldn't?" Most people run when confronted with being seen. He stepped aside to let her in. "Coffee? I made a fresh pot." The studio had been transformed. A vintage armchair, upholstered in deep burgundy velvet, sat in the center of the space, positioned to catch the light from several strategically placed lamps. A blank canvas waited on an easel nearby, and the air smelled of fresh paint and something else, something warm and inviting, like sandalwood. Natasha accepted the coffee mug he offered, grateful for something to hold. "So how does this work?" "First, we talk. I need to understand who you are beneath the armor you wear." Julian settled onto a stool, picking up a charcoal pencil. "Tell me about your day." "My day?" She hadn't expected such an ordinary question. "I had 3 meetings, reviewed 2 campaign proposals, argued with my boss about budget allocations. Pretty standard." "That's what you did. I asked about your day. How did it feel?" Natasha sat in the velvet chair, the fabric soft against her skin. "Exhausting. Like I was performing in a play where everyone knows their lines except me." "Better. Julian's pencil moved across a sketch pad. "Keep going." "There's not much to tell. I woke up, went to work, came here. That's my life in a nutshell." "When did you stop living and start just existing?" The question hit her like a physical blow. Natasha set down her coffee cup, her throat suddenly tight. "That's not fair." "Art isn't about fair, it's about truth." Julian looked up from his sketching, his gray eyes steady on hers. "Something happened to you, something that made you decide it was safer to be efficient than to be alive. What was it?" Walls coming down. Natasha stood abruptly, walking to the windows overlooking the dark street below. She could see her reflection in the glass, a woman who looked put together, but somehow hollow. "I was engaged once. His name was David. We met in college, dated for 6 years. Everyone said we were perfect together, stable, compatible, sensible. But you weren't in love." "I thought I was. I thought love was supposed to be comfortable, safe." She wrapped her arms around herself. 2 weeks before the wedding, I found out he'd been seeing someone else for over a year, someone spontaneous and artistic, and everything I wasn't. Julian set down his pencil. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He did me a favor." Natasha turned to face him. "He told me I was too controlled, too closed off, that being with me was like being with a beautiful statue, perfect on the outside, empty on the inside." He was cruel. He was honest. Natasha returned to the chair, surprising herself with how easy it was becoming to talk. "After that, I decided being empty was safer than being broken. I focused on work, on being good at something measurable. Feelings are messy and unpredictable. Results aren't." Julian studied her for a long moment. "Do you know what I see when I look at you? A closed book? A woman who's so afraid of being hurt again that she's hurting herself instead." He stood, walking over to stand in front of her. "You're not empty, Natasha. You're full of things you won't let yourself feel. That's what I want to paint. Not the mask you show the world, but the person underneath who's desperate to break free." His words pierced through defenses she didn't know she still had. Tears pricked at her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. "Don't." Julian's voice was gentle. "Don't hide. Not here." "I don't cry." Even as she said it, a tear slipped down her cheek. "You do now." He returned to his stool, pencil moving rapidly. "That's it. That's what I need to capture. Not sadness, but the moment when someone stops pretending they're not sad." The process began. Over the next 3 weeks, Natasha's evenings became divided into 2 worlds. During the day, she was still the efficient marketing executive, presenting campaigns and managing teams. But 3 nights a week, she transformed into someone entirely different. Someone who sat in a velvet chair and led us. With only 2 weeks remaining until the exhibition deadline, Natasha found herself at the studio almost every evening, not just for the scheduled sessions. She would arrive with dinner or coffee, sitting quietly while Julian worked on the finishing touches of the 7 portraits. Each painting showed her in a different state of emotional undress, from guarded to vulnerable, to something that looked dangerously close to hope. "You've been avoiding looking at them," Julian observed one night as he cleaned his brushes. The canvases lined the far wall, covered with white sheets. "I'm not ready." "When will you be ready to see yourself as I see you?" Natasha stood from her usual chair, walking to the covered paintings. Her hand hovered over the first sheet. "What if I don't recognize myself? What if you've painted someone I can't live up to?" Julian came to stand behind her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "What if I've painted exactly who you already are, and you just haven't been willing to see it?" She pulled back the first sheet. The woman in the painting sat rigid in the burgundy chair, her hands folded perfectly in her lap, her expression polite but distant. But her eyes told a different story. They held oceans of loneliness, of carefully maintained control ready to shatter at any moment. "That's how I looked the first night," Natasha breathed. "That's how you've looked most of your life." Julian moved to uncover the second painting. But not anymore. One by one, he revealed the progression. Each portrait showed her walls coming down, layer by careful layer. The third painting captured her mid-laugh, joy transforming her features. The fourth showed her crying, but with a strange beauty in the vulnerability. The fifth portrayed her lost in thought, unguarded and real. But it was the sixth painting that made Natasha's breath catch. In it, she sat in the chair with her head turned towards someone outside the frame, her expression soft and open in a way she'd never seen on her own face. It was intimate, tender, revealing. "When did you paint that?" Her voice shook. "Last week. You were telling me about the carnival with your father, and you looked at me like that." Julian's voice was quiet behind her. I couldn't not capture it. "I look like someone in love." The words hung in the air between them. Julian didn't respond, and Natasha couldn't turn around to face him. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "The seventh painting," she said instead. "Where is it?" "Unfinished. I've been stuck on it for days." He moved past her to an easel in the corner, pulling back a sheet. "I know what it needs to be, but I can't seem to get it right." The canvas showed her outline, the basic structure of her face and form, but it was incomplete. Raw. Waiting. What's it supposed to be? You choosing yourself. You deciding that being seen, being vulnerable, being real is worth the risk. Julian ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "But every time I try to paint it, something feels false, like I'm projecting what I hope you'll become, instead of capturing who you are." Confronting reality, Natasha turned to face him fully. "Maybe that's because I haven't decided yet." "Decided what?" "Whether I'm brave enough to be that person outside this studio." She gestured to the paintings around them. "In here, with you, it's easy to let my guard down. But out there, in my real life, I don't know if I can maintain this. It's terrifying." Julian closed the distance between them, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Do you think I'm not terrified? I've spent years painting other people's souls because examining my own was too painful. And then you walked in here and suddenly I couldn't hide anymore either." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that somewhere between that first night and now, this stopped being just about painting." His gray eyes searched hers. "You must know that." Natasha did know. She'd felt it in every lingering glance, every conversation that stretched past midnight, every moment when the air between them crackled with unspoken possibilities. But knowing and acknowledging were different things entirely. "We barely know each other," she said, even as her heart argued otherwise. "I know you better than anyone in your life. I've seen every defense you have, watched you lower them one by one. I know what makes you laugh, what makes you cry, what you're afraid of, and what you dream about, even though you won't admit you're dreaming." His voice dropped lower. "Tell me that doesn't count." "It counts." The admission felt like jumping off a cliff. "But what happens after the exhibition, when this project is done and I'm not coming here anymore? Does this just end? Is that what you want?" "I don't know what I want. For 3 years, I've known exactly where I stood, what my life looked like. Safe, predictable, empty. And now everything is confused and chaotic, and I feel like I'm standing on the edge of something that could be either wonderful or completely devastating." Julian's hands moved from her shoulders to cup her face, his thumbs tracing gentle circles on her cheeks. "Love is always devastating, Natasha. That's what makes it worth having." "You're in love with me?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "I'm in love with you. I started falling the moment you cried and tried to hide it. I kept falling every time you laughed like you'd forgotten how. I'm completely gone for you, and it's the most terrifying and exhilarating thing I've ever experienced." He leaned his forehead against her. "So yes, I'm in love with you, utterly and completely." Tears spilled down Natasha's cheeks, but this time she didn't try to stop them. "I'm so scared." "I know, me too." He pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. "But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." Something inside Natasha cracked wide open, all the walls she'd so carefully constructed crumbling at once. She rose on her toes and kissed him,